It is 1900. The world is approaching closer and closer towards the Great War. As the great powers arm themselves to face the inevitable, which power stands where? Who is the mightiest of the great powers, and how do they compare to their enemies? So here is the top 10 great powers at the dawn of the 20th century. I will rank these nations according to their military, naval, and economic power mostly, but I will also consider how much of an influence they had in international politics. I will also weigh the population heavily, as a larger population often means a bigger army and usually a bigger economy. Before we get to the video, please subscribe. Subscribing to the channel not only motivates me to make more videos, but also allows the video to be recommended to more people by the YouTube algorithm. Thank you and enjoy. The Netherlands. As we reach year 1900, the Dutch Empire is more or less in a decline. The Republic no longer enjoys the same naval might and wealth as it did 200 years ago. The Dutch were also fighting an expensive war in Aceh, which left its navy underfunded and the state in economic distress. Despite all this, the Netherlands controlled the rich and populous lands of Indonesia. Her GDP and population surpassed Japan and the Ottoman Empire. However, I put the Netherlands at the end of the list, as a huge portion of her manpower is in Indonesia, which could be cut off by other great powers who possess a larger navy. The Dutch army was underfunded and small, and her navy was overstretched. So the Netherlands depended on careful diplomacy to defend her borders against other great powers, which isn't exactly the sign of a powerhouse. So overall, Netherlands ranks the 10th in our list, with its fairly strong economy yet small army and navy. The Ottoman Empire. I had doubts ranking the Ottoman Empire above the Netherlands in this list. Ottoman Empire on paper controls a vast empire that stretches from Bosnia to Egypt and Libya to Caucasus. It is rich in natural resources and has a large population. However, the empire is not industrialized and has significant financial troubles. On top of that, it is riddled by social upheaval, with various ethnicities within the empire looking for the first opportunity to rebel. Ottomans also has a lower population and GDP than the Netherlands. Then why is it ranked above the Netherlands, you might ask? First of all, Ottoman Empire has a vast army that numbers more than 250,000 men. Now, the Ottoman army is no match against proper great powers such as Russia or Austria in terms of training and weaponry. However, it still was a more capable fighting force than the Dutch army. Other than this, the Ottomans also have strategic advantages. The empire controls Russia's access to the Mediterranean and enjoys influence among Muslims, albeit mostly nominal. Another key advantage the Ottomans has is it has a large Turkish, Kurdish and Arab population base in its home territory, which could be mobilized quickly. Meanwhile, the Dutch would have to bring troops all the way from Indonesia. So overall, the Ottoman Empire ranks just above the Netherlands, with its poor economic state but large military and large population. Italy. Now we are entering the real great power territory. Italy had a population of 33 million, which is slightly higher than the Ottoman 31 million. However, unlike the Ottomans, more than 90% of its population is made of Italians who are loyal to the kingdom and can be relied upon. Italy is also fairly industrialized, greatly surpassing the Ottomans in GDP. It has a considerable army and a navy, at least on paper, which gained the young kingdom colonies in Eritrea, Somalia, and later Libya. though the Italian military would prove itself not as formidable as one might think. In 1911, Italy invaded Ottoman Libya, and despite lack of any Ottoman resistance, Italians greatly struggled taking it. But more decisively, the Italian army heavily underperformed in the Great War due to logistical problems, incompetent leadership, and motivational issues. Thus, it ranks 8th in our list. Japan. Japan, the land of the rising sun, and a rising power in 1900. It is rapidly industrializing, with a marginally lower GDP than Italy. However, it has a decent population of 45 million, which is about 40% higher than that of Italy. Like Italy, Japan enjoys a monocultural population, with almost entirety of its population being Japanese. It has a navy that rivals all others in East Asia, including the navies of European great powers, and a large army of around 200,000. Just 5 years prior, Japan had beaten the Qing Empire and colonized modern-day Taiwan. Within the next 5 years, Japan would prove its position as a great power by defeating Russia in the Russo-Japanese War. Japan by this date, however, is yet to reach its full potential. It still isn't as industrialized as European great powers and lacks the economy to field a larger military force. Its victory against Russia also does not prove that Japan was more powerful than Russia. Let's not forget that the Russo-Japanese War happened in Japan's backyard. Meanwhile, Russia had to bring most of its troops and supplies all the way from Europe, halfway across the world. So even though Japan is a power to be reckoned with, it still cannot go head to head with prime great powers of Europe, unless the fight happens in Japan's backyard. So overall, Japan ranks number 7 with its large and industrializing economy, mighty navy, and considerable army. AustriaHungarian Empire. The Austria-Hungarian Empire was a power riddled with more domestic troubles than external, just like the Ottoman Empire. With every passing year, its minorities became more and more rebellious. In 19th century, during the Hungarian Revolt, the Austria-Hungarian Empire was barely saved by Russian armies from disintegration, and now it barely held together. Only 20% of the empire was Austrian, and another 13% was Hungarian, who have been loyal to Vienna since the implementation of dual monarchy in 1867. This means that the remaining 67% of the population consisted of Italians, Slovakians, Czechs, and other minorities, and they had to be kept in check by the Hungarians and Austrians. In other words, 32 million people out of the 47 million that lived in the Austria-Hungarian Empire wanted it gone. In World War I, this meant that these minorities were not only untrustworthy, rebellious, and prone to defections, but also it was extremely hard to communicate. German officers would have serious trouble communicating their orders to minority troops who often did not speak German. All these problems overall weakened the Austria-Hungarian Empire severely, limiting its ability to project power and wage war compared to its size. Yet despite this, the empire was huge and industrialized. Austria, Czechia, and Hungary were booming centers of industry. It had an impressive infrastructure and military industry that could supply large armies if need be. This makes it possible for the Austria-Hungarian Empire to rank above Italy in my list despite all its shortcomings. France. France had long lost its position as the prime power in Europe. French armies dominated Europe during the Napoleonic Wars, though this war left French armies crushed. French military was put to shame once again during the Franco-Prussian War, which put France under the shadow of the newly unified German Empire. yet France was still a proper superpower. Its colonial empire included a third of Africa, Indochina, and many other parts of the world. It had twice as much population and GDP as the Austria-Hungarian Empire, and unlike Austria, France wasn't riddled with internal troubles. Even the colonial troops proved to be fairly loyal and dependable during the World War I. Overall, France ranks 5th in our list, with its global capability of projecting power, its large economy, and military might. The Russian Empire. The Russian Empire is a behemoth with unmatched potential in Europe. It has twice the population of France at 140 million and a massive army of more than 1 million troops. Russia also was rich in many resources, including oil. Now, it also has its own massive problems. The empire is barely industrialized, and its people are impoverished. It has problems arming her massive armies. Meanwhile, there's serious political upheaval, which will culminate in the fall of the empire in 1918. Now, these are serious troubles that many of you may think that I should put Russia below France. However, I think when doing such a list, one should put the trajectory of nations into perspective. France is declining in 1900. It is as industrialized as a country can be, and its population is stagnant, if not declining. Meanwhile, Russia not only has a massive and booming population, but also has a lot of room to grow, to industrialize. An industrialized Russia will easily be able to surpass France. And we see this happen some 40 years later with the Soviet Union. In 1938, the Soviets, despite losing its most developed regions after World War I, has doubled the GDP of France. So overall, when we put the massive manpower and resource advantage of Russia and its future trajectory, Russia ranks at number 4, slightly above France. The USA. Ranking of the USA at the 3rd place would probably shock many in 1900, as many people were unaware how rich and full of potential the United States were at the time. Now, in 1900, the United States is by no means a military superpower. It had a small, undergunned, and unmodern military that surely wasn't capable of waging a modern war. Its navy, however, was formidable, probably ranking just below British and German navies. The real American might lies in its economy, demographics, and geography, however. The United States had a slightly higher population than Germany and almost twice the GDP. Also note that the American population was increasing swiftly with immigration from Europe. The United States also enjoyed natural resources that were unimaginable to European powers, aside from Russia. Thus, the United States ranked number 3rd with its massive economy, yet inability to back it up militarily. The German Empire. German Empire was simply a military juggernaut. It had a heavy industry that was geared to maintain a highly capable and large military force. It had the largest army in Europe after the Russian army, and unlike the Russian one, German army was highly trained, armed with the best equipment, and well supplied. The Germans repeatedly proved their military superiority during World War I, as they almost single-handedly fought the war, also pulling the weight of their often incompetent allies, Austria and Ottoman Empire. German army armed and provided troops to their allies, meanwhile fighting French and British armies on their own in the Western Front. German Navy was also a challenge for the British Royal Navy in its strength. It was the second most powerful navy on Earth and proved its combat ability in the Battle of Jutland. Overall, the German Empire clearly ranks in the 2nd place with its economic, military, and naval might. The British Empire. The British Empire is the clear number one of our list. It has a massive colonial empire that covers a third of Africa, India, Canada, and key waterways, such as the Malacca Strait and the Suez Canal. The British Empire has 5 times the population of Germany, with 400 million people, and 3 times the GDP. British Navy is by far the largest navy of the world, with the ability of dominating almost every body of water simultaneously across the globe. Its army is clearly weaker than the German one, yet the resources and its economic might more than makes up for that shortcoming, as would be proven in the Great War. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please leave a like and please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.